You remember how we met?
yeah, I remember. You got this email of the guy who orders it, so it's still going. We still sell.
You still
Alfa
sell
stuff.
the Alfa
Yeah, we still
suspensions.
sell Alfa stuff.
So when I met you, you were doing primarily the 75 experience, which were the Alfa Milanos in the US for American consumers. But in Europe, the Milano was actually named for Alfa Romeo's 75th anniversary. And when I met you, you had about 15 or 17 of them when I went to the ring the first time. But I heard that when you retired the 75 fleet, you actually had 75 75s. Was that true?
Well, yes, no, and I still have. We have. Well, the cars are not there anymore.
You still have all
but the papers. I think I have 100. It must be 100 papers of Alfa 75.
They exist in the ether, but they've all been written off by.
Yes. And the car is gone. That's why we had so many engines. Because the car was gone and the engine was still there.
So for those who don't know the story, Ron and I have been friends for about 18 years, and it didn't really start out as a friendship. I heard that this Dutchman was making these suspensions for Alfa 75s from Milanos, and I was building my car, and I ordered the suspension. It never came, and I threw email back and forth. I got frustrated one day and called Ron up, and you said, well, I sent it. I said, well, I didn't get it. And around we went, and you did the gentleman thing. You said, hey, I tell you what did you say?
Well, first let me tell you this. It took so long for you to get the order in that you moved house 3 times or whatever. So I had the old address, and when you finally got the money, I sent it out right away the day after, and it was sitting on a porch somewhere of a house where he once lived, and of course it didn't arrive. Right?
And back then, I was a try-it-yourselfer. I mean, every dollar mattered, so I couldn't afford to buy that.
So in the end, what we were falling out. It was not pretty.
He thought this South African boer was trying to pull one over on him.
Yeah, he wants a free suspension.
This Dutchman was trying to do something to me.
So in the end, we sent a second set out for peanuts.
Well, what you did is your suggestion was what I thought was very creative. You said, let's do one at cost.
Yeah.
And I'll cover half, you cover half, and you pay the shipping. I said, go.
Yeah.
And then I thought this guy is reasonable. And then the Alfa convention came up. So I invited you to come out and come visit us for the convention.
Mm.
You stayed with me. And I remember I picked you up in that the Denali, that supercharged Denali SUV. And we got in the truck, and what was I listening to?
Are we talking 20 years ago? Right?
Yes, I was listening to Johnny Cash. He hates Johnny Cash.
I hate Johnny Cash.
And first thing, so back then you didn't have an iPod that could hold your whole library. So Ron was still flying around with this big satchel of like CDs flipped. So he pulls out the satchel and he starts going through, Jim Iroquois and other shit to listen to. And then all of a sudden we fell on John Hyatt.
Oh, really?
It's very obscure, right? John Hyatt, not a lot of people know who John Hyatt is. So John plays guitar. Ron plays guitar, and not a lot of people know that. But he's actually a good musician. So so the friendship started there, and it's been great. I've been back to the ring several times, and I've taken other people over there, and we've had some really great times. Ron and Manuel are great hosts when we're over there.
Johnny Cash, I remember being at Group 2, and that was what was playing. And we were
playing all the time.
We were putting suspensions in cars, and I had to listen to this horrible music. and that in Seattle. I mean, we were 2 weeks in hillbilly country in Tennessee, and we did not need to listen to Johnny Cash. But here we.
But from all the previous trips to the Seattle area, you'd stay with me. But now you've become so popular, you've got your other friends. So I have to book time with you. I have to do an interview formally to see my friend Ron.
Well, I'm almost retired, I feel.
Are you?
Yeah.
Well, they call you the Flying Dutchman. We can get into why that is, but I hear now they're going to change that to the Flying Nun because you've reached this deity status. How did you get the name the Flying Dutchman, besides being a hell of a hot shoe?
I don't know.
Who told you that first? Where did it start?
I don't know. I think I have another name.
Well, you have a lot of names.
Red Ron. for the English. I don't know where that came from.
Red Ron?
Red Ron.
That's funny.
Yeah.
When I was at your house in Eindhoven, a while, that was a long time ago, something that was interesting, you mentioned that you'd never sold a car before. Like you've kept every car you've ever bought.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your business grew so much beyond the Alfa 75s. I mean, now you've got over 200 cars in your fleet. You've got all these Porsches and BMWs, and your own personal collection has grown. I would imagine some of that's changed, right? I mean, at some point you start selling some cars, or do you refer to that as kind of your own personal collection of things? You've never sold your own personal cars. You had the Tiger there, the Sunbeam Tiger, and you had the Golf livery 308 Ferrari. You had the red 308 Ferrari which I drove, and you had the Lancias. So cars that you started with. You
And I still have them. Yeah, most of them. There's only, I think, but there's two types of cars. The cars which you buy for the business and where you, I mean, there's cars which I never have driven at all. And there's cars where there's a history, or the very special cars. And cars where there's a history, which I have for a long time, and I've never sold one. The only one I sold, and that goes even longer back before we met, is what I was working in software business, and we had a company here where I used to be in Seattle for 4,000 or 5,000 a year. And then before we did the software business, I was buying cars here. And I bought a lot of these Triumph TR4 and TR5, or the 250 is American, TR6, MGBs, all these type of British sports cars.
I'll sell you some more of those.
And but there's not that much left. So the story is that back then, these cars were quite expensive in Europe, and I think also in Japan. So most of that stock went that direction, and here you could go to any block of any street, and there was an MGB for sale for $1,000 or $2,000, and they would go for 10 or 12 or 15,000 in Holland and in Germany. So that's what we did. We just bought these cars, and it was easy to find them. They were cheap. So you didn't spend that much time, put them in a container and ship them back to Europe. In the end, I did that for 4 or 5 years or something, and in the end, it wasn't only that to buy cars here, you had to really drive very far. They were 4 times the price, and the quality was half. So that ended, and then also in Europe we got competition from our own cars we sold to somebody who wanted something else to. So the competition came from your own business, so that ended. But the only car I sold, which was a car for myself, but I remember that very well. I bought a CJ5 Jeep, which was modeled up higher and with special suspension, and that's the car. So.
Do you still have the SL, the 280, 260 SL?
It's a 230, the 1964 230 SL.
230. 64?
Yeah.
You still have that one?
I still have that one.
And
I have the Tiger.
Tell me the Tiger, the distributor we sent to you 15 years ago. Did you put it in? Did you make it run?
15 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that car runs. Car runs. But
it's an English hot rod. It's an English muscle car. Right?
It's a poor man. They call it a poor man's Cobra. Eh?
Yeah.
People who can't afford the real thing, they.
We had one here recently. It's on our website. The black one that a private collector here owns, and it is gorgeous and it is fun to drive. It is a really amazing little car. I didn't know I'd like those cars that much until I drove this one, and then I got out and I burned the back of my legs on the exhaust. So and this was the reason the customer was selling the car, because his wife got out and burned the back of her ankles, and that was it.
Okay.
He bought the car at auction, she burned her leg, car goes bye-bye. Tell me about another car that I saw there in Eindhoven at your house, was the Lancia that started the Nürburgring stuff for you. Because that's what a lot of people really want to know about is your operations at the ring. You started in that car, and I think you told me you had something like 50,000 kilometers in that one car. That was the one car that, before the Alfas even, that started.
In fact, when I started racing, Racing is more about waiting than about racing.
Right.
You are 3-4 days at a track and you drive for an hour, and the rest is waiting and prepping and playing with the car in the pit box.
Right.
So you don't get that much seat time. We have the luxury that there's a racetrack, and Eindhoven, Holland was about 2 hours from the Nürburgring, and the Nürburgring was a track where you could drive every day of the week. So you could just go there, buy a ticket, and that is unheard of. I don't think that ever existed or exists anywhere else in the world, where you can go to a racetrack without, even without a racing license, without any preparations, without any checkups on the car. You just buy a ticket and you go.
You run what you brung, you take your own life in your own hands.
Yeah, so you go. So I had this Lancia Delta and the Graal, and back then that was really, when you drive it now, it's not feel powerful, but yeah, what does of the old cars? It's but that car back then, the traction of the four-wheel drive, the torque of the turbo, that was something else. That was something which really you needed to get used to, all the speed and all the grip. And that is the car I used to develop suspension stuff for, and I think maybe now it's got 70,000 kilometers or 80 or something, but there's at least 50 or 60,000 kilometers was done on that racetrack, because we just kept on going in circles the whole day.
So someone would show up and they'd say, "I want to drive," and you put them in the passenger seat and you go show them the line.
That was just a car for myself to go enjoy myself, to practice, and to develop the suspension.
What race car were you driving at the time? Was that the 308 or the Alfa?
Yeah, the Works Group A Alfa GDV, Alfetta GDV6. Back to the Lancia, the suspension is standard. It is horrible. We all think that it's the Group A rally car that won these 5-6 championships back to back, but it is that car was just stood model for the Group A car, and it is horrible understeering because it lacks power and torque. So you always have this understeer, and then we had to develop the suspension to get rid of that understeer. And at first, it's of course a difficult thing, because you need more power, and that helps a bit, but you need to, in fact, make the front end or the rear end worse by doing all sorts of tricks to see how it works with balance. You go out on the rear and shit like that, and pump the tires with 3 bars and try to get it to rotate. And when you finally have that done, then the overall performance is going down, but it's got balance at a very low level. And then you try to make the rear and the front end better, and that is very difficult with these cars, because you have all the weight at the front and McPherson thingies hanging down there. To make that work is difficult, and that took a lot of time to create balance. I think we did rear anti-roll bars also for the car, which is a little bit bigger, and all these little things in the end made it, brought the car to balance, and then it was quite a piece of kit back at that time.
You know, there are a lot of those cars here now. I'll come back to that in a second, but I want to go back to something you just said. You know, one thing I learned from you when we were setting up the Alphas and learning more about the transaxles and the Milanos and GP6s and how you set them up and why you set them up the way you did. There is a sort of a very common misconception in the track communities that when a car understeers, your roll bar is too stiff or the suspension is too stiff, and it plows like a pig, and they will end up doing things to make the front worse, really, to keep up with the rear of the car. You were the first person that was able to explain that to me in a sense where it caught on with me, like, why make the front worse to keep up with the rear when really it's the rear that needs work.
Yeah.
A car that understeers, it just means more grip at the rear, and you need to bring the front back up to that standard.
To that level, yeah.
That standard. But talk a little bit more about that concept on the side of the Milanos and really how you approach that to get those cars to handle as well as they do.
Well, I think the Milano or the 75, as we know it, is already a very good handling car for road use, and for track use. There's just too much squat and dive. There's too much roll in the car. The limited slip differential is a non-issue because it doesn't work, or it stopped working if it had one at all. Because most don't,
or they didn't come with it.
Right. So you just lose too much energy because of all the movements in the car, and on very short tracks where you have second gear corners, it just lifts the inside rear wheel, so you're standing still in the corner. And then when it falls down, it's gripping, and you're all over the place. And it's not up to the level of what it could be. And I think I always referenced that a bit on with the cars of that time when we started doing these suspensions, which was in the late 90s. Then we had a benchmark was a 996 GT3 RS, a 996, and the other one was a BMW the E46 CSL. When did that came out?
Yeah, that was 2000 until 2006.
Yeah, and when people ask me, is your suspension hard or soft or whatever, so it's not hard and it's not soft, but it is what it needs to be to get the performance out of the car. But if you want to know if it rattles your teeth out, I think it isn't, but it's such a subjective thing. Yeah. But it is not harder than a 996 GT3 RS, which is perfectly usable on the street, and the CSL is the same.
Well, it depends on the streets. Seattle streets lately are a little bit like
that is a bit different, yeah.
Mogadishu. So
Jesus Christ! When you leave the airport, the holes.
Yeah, it's rough.
It's
rough.
You need it.
I'm working on it. I'm running for office, and if I can change some of it, I will. But so speaking about the Porsches, you've come so far.
Maybe about the Alfa, to what you need to do to stop the roll in the car is just put a big anti-roll bar at the front. And you can and that's exactly what you said. People say, "Oh, you have a big anti-roll bar. We get all this understeer." No, you don't. You get traction at the rear, and you get a rear which you can, at demand, can position the way you need it to. Even with the little power of the car, you can rotate the car better, and the front end will be more effective and not more understeer because you keep the thing planted. So first take all the roll out of the car. And that was back then. I think we sold these anti-roll bars for €100 or very cheap.
Yeah, it was.
With a few cut rubbers and this, but it was not. It didn't look pretty at the beginning, but it was very effective. And those were the whole suspension thing developed because we needed these cars to perform at the Nürburgring.
Well, Group 2 sold a lot of those suspensions in the US. I mean, it became such a huge thing for us. I helped build dozens of cars with these suspensions, and I can just honestly say it was amazing what you did. And I never had a chance to do anything with a Lancia suspension. Do you still do Lancia suspensions or not? Well, your business, the RSR side has grown so much that the suspensions are more of a distraction. I realize that. But now the Lancias, because they came within the 25-year import rule, there are so many of those cars coming into the US. And when you drive them, it's kind of like I always say, never meet your heroes. I mean, they're just just terrible cars. They feel like old cars now.
Yeah.
But there are people now who have some demand to make them better.
And I think they feel old cars because you when you don't know these cars and you know that they won that rally championship and they look like high tech and you drive it now, it's an old car. But I think what is it? Kony makes a set for that car. I think we still have a few sets for Evo. I know we have a few sets for Evo.
Yeah, there's cars get stupid money now, but they come to the US now, and people buy them because they're nostalgic about them. They were a thing when they were a little kid, and now, like me, you maybe you've either earned some money, you can afford to buy it, or you're fortunate enough, like me, I have a shop. I can't afford most of the cars that we work on, but I get to drive them for road testing or sorting or whatever. Well, the customer wants you to drive the car, tell them what you think, and a lot of these old cars, they just feel like old cars. You got to figure out what to do to make them feel a little bit more modern. They don't want the suspension so stiff that it's going to rattle your teeth out, but when they push the car a little bit, they at least want some performance out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got that dialed on the BMWs. I mean, on the E46s, E36s, E30s, we can make those things fly, and makes for a very nice suspension on the road. But nobody around here really offers anything for the nonsense.
It's the numbers are too low.
Yeah, the volumes
are
are
too low. I said we have a few suspension sets for the Evos, which what is available is available. There's nothing made anymore, and I can give you all the alignment settings that I know that work for the car. Yeah.
So then let's flip over a bit. So your business expands way beyond the Alphas in those early days. I remember you started bringing some Renault Clios, and then that sort of grew to the Renault Megans. And the last time I was there, I drove, don't laugh, I drove a Honda Civic at the Nürburgring. I flew 10,000 miles to drive a Honda Civic. But it is the new Civic Type R Turbo, 6-speed manual. The car is fantastic. And the day I got there, you guys had just set up those two Type Rs. And you had the Megane that was rear wheel steer. I think that was the RS.
So Megane RS4, no, it's Megane RS4 then.
And we took the two cars around the ring, and then we swapped cars. And I mean, they're both amazing. I mean, you don't know the car is front wheel drive. When I drove that car at Spa as well, it would four wheel drift. It was pretty amazing. So KW did those suspensions for you, right?
Yeah, we KW is a partner, and they do suspensions. But I think the Hondas are stock.
No, you guys had KWs on. I'm pretty sure. I'm not going to argue with you, but I'm pretty sure you guys had just done KWs on those cars when I got there, and that was October of 19 was the last time we were there.
Okay.
I could be wrong. Could be mistaken.
Yeah, maybe you know.
It was just the car just didn't feel front wheel drive. And Megane especially. Megane was paddle shift, but it steers from the rear. And I'm glad you warned me about it. Because
oh wait, on the but the Honda is I think stock. I could be wrong, but the Megane has the KW set. Yeah.
Because KW is down the road from you guys. At the ring.
Yes and no. They are in Fichtelbach in Bayern.
Right.
All the way close to Munich, but there's a lot going there.
But you don't do development for every car that you buy now anymore. I mean, these cars come from the factory pretty good, and then when you need
no,
stuff,
that's not right. We do also development, but most of it is developed already, and we need to do setup. And sometimes we do something like, for example, at brake pads. There's a completely different subject, I know, but brake pads are so difficult because when you have stuff that is too good and has a too high of a CW value, then people just kill the brakes and they make it an unstable motor car on track. When you are when it's a little bit less aggressive and people feather the brakes because they are afraid of braking, then you glaze the pads and the brakes don't work anymore. So it's so difficult to work in a way it works for an average, for the average type of drivers.
And you don't know from one day to the next what driver is going to be in the car.
Yeah, and that's why sometimes when you rent out a Golf for €1,000 and you stick for 800 euros of pads on there, and they're gone halfway through the day. I mean, it is tires is so much easier than brakes.
I was astonished when I looked at the running costs. So you guys put out an article a couple of years ago when you retired Gojira. on the running cost for that Nissan GTR, and it listed off how many sets of tires, how many engines, how many gearboxes, how many sets of brakes, and the running cost of operating one of these cars at the ring is just, it blew me away.
Yeah.
I mean, and people show up, they pay good dollars to rent these cars, they want their pound of flesh, and if it's a typical driver from this side of the pond, maybe they put their wallet on the gas pedal and then they put the wallet on the brake and then they put the wallet, there's not enough finesse.
Yeah.
I've watched you wrestle these cars around the ring and Spa, and I'm always impressed by how little input you use in the brakes.
Mm-hmm.
It always surprises me.
Yeah, don't rock the boat.
Of course, I'm sitting in the passenger seat. I'm going, Ron, are you going to brake? I'm thinking to myself, is this Dutchman going to brake? Is he going to brake? Is he going to brake? And it's usually a motorcycle or a Porsche that you're chasing. So.
But with back to the beginning of this story, when we were setting up the Lancia and later the Milanos, then we developed the suspension for our own cars, but also to sell to you guys and then over in the whole world. This stuff was sold, and both parts of the business was rather small because nobody knew what the Nürburgring was, or very few people knew what the Nürburgring was, and that you could drive every day. And so at first we only had the Alfa clubs and then the Ferrari clubs. They were fine with the Alfas, and then we had the Porsche guys, and they were not fine with the Alfas.
Yeah, no, that changed quickly. They fly all over there. They're gonna drive this thing called the Nürburgring, and they look at this stinky Alfa. But the interesting thing was, you tell them, listen, you cannot outdrive this car. You're not at that skill level yet. They don't want to hear that. Yeah. But that 145 horsepower car, you have the momentum to drive the car.
Yeah. And I always said, well, you can later on you can rent a Porsche, but I tell you, it's, if you drive the Alfa and you overtake these guys in their Porsches, you feel so
in the
good.
Corners, yeah.
But the other way around, if I give you the Porsche and you're overtaken by these Alfas, it's not good.
It doesn't feel good. Well, and then there's the liability piece of it. I mean, whenever we start,
we don't talk about liability.
Whenever we start the sessions, the classroom sessions before going on track, it's always good that they impress on you that when you crash this car, your bill will be X from RSR, but then also the Germans are going to charge you for the
guardrail,
50 meters of arm code that you took out, and for somebody's hospital visit and for the track cleanup. Yeah. So it's, they don't call it the green hell for nothing. But it was cool. The early days, nobody knew who Ron was. Nobody knew really what the Nürburgring was. When I first started telling people here in the States, 2003, 2004, YouTube was not as big of a thing yet either. And it was nice back in those days. Like, it was so accessible. Now you've got a lot of competition. A lot of people have kind of ridden your coattails and trying to present a lot of the same products. But you've stayed ahead. Like your fleet is much more advanced now. Yeah. Now there's a broader range of driving and less skills.
And therefore you could give almost everybody a car without ABS and without ESP, without stuff. And that is, you cannot do that anymore. Because the
skill levels is not there.
The public changed. Yeah. Now it's a commodity. They go 1 week to go bungee jumping, and then they come driving. But I think that's the thing. So we need to cater for a completely different audience now. That's why we have the Clios. Yeah, you cannot put that car in the wall.
You still have a few of those running.
Yeah, we do have Clios.
But now, like a BMW, do you have M2Cs in the fleet?
We do have M2. We have M40. The 240s. Yeah. We have the M2, and we make what we call RSR edition of these cars, because these cars are stock standard. The only thing changed is the brakes, and that already goes quite well up to a certain speed on the Nordschleife. But when you really go fast, then these cars, they start floating in all these sections where it's high speed and a bit of corner in there, and then it gets, I wouldn't say, it gets hairy. Yeah, it gets, and So we offer for people who really have the ability and want to go really fast. We have the same car, but we put the suspension, the bucket seats, the cage, 6-point belts, Hans, so everything, which is much more of a race car. But in Germany, it's very difficult. You have to have everything what you change on the car has to be MOT'd. And there's less and less stuff you can do. So it has to stay within certain.
The MOT is the European version of our DOT essentially.
Yeah, it's called
Department of Transportation.
It's called TUV.
TUV.
MOT is English, I think. Then.
Right.
Yeah.
MOT is the British guys.
British,
right?
yeah. So the TUV is very strict, so you cannot do everything, but we do what we can do to make it, close to a very serious track day car. Yeah.
So in the past, when I've come over with people, it's just been sort of friends and very sort of relaxed, but your business has become so much more organized now. And somebody can actually go to RSRNurburg or go to RSR Spa, go to your website, and they can book these trips through you guys directly. But in the US, sometimes there are people who like to have a jungle guide, somebody who's been there before. Mm-hmm. So between us, we can help them with the logistics of accommodations and transfers. Because you fly into, say, Frankfurt, Maine, and there's a drive out to the ring. Do you rent a car? Do you not rent a car? When you get out to the ring, there's really not much there. There's things to see. There's a museum. There's stores and gas stations, but it's cow pastures. Like, it's surprisingly remote.
Yeah.
So help with the logistics of airport transfers, accommodations, and then scheduling the classes in a way that it meets that driver's skill level is really important. They should have an instructor in the beginning, and depending on the skill level, they should probably stay with the instructor for most of the day, or not. Or if they're a very advanced driver, they need that initial guidance on that track, and then they need that advanced one-on-one training. And you've got a whole menu of these services laid out very well. You want to talk about that some more?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's for us where the most of the customers were from Central Europe, and that was easier because these people could come with their own car, and we did the instruction on the North Side. For many of them racing as well in the historics or in any other race on the North Side. And we only had a few individuals from the US, most of them racing guys, who then needed a training for their racing. And because of the popularity of the place, that opened up to the whole world, and therefore we now have about 25% of our business is now North and South America, and the other 25% is Australia and New Zealand and what is it, these Southeast Asia countries. So that there's a lot of people coming from far away, and everybody has the same kind of not a problem, but the extra hurdle that comes with traveling from long distance. Where do you go to? Do they speak my language? What documents do I need? Especially in America, I feel that most people coming now, they are taken by the hand by somebody who's been there and who tells them, listen, this and this is how it works, and this is how you're going to do it. Everybody can do this on his own, but when you want to come with a group of like-minded people from the US and do the Nürburgring, there's so many options now.
Yeah.
But BMW North America, they do these trips to the Nürburgring where you will drive a BMW for it's only a few laps, and you have to sit in with somebody you don't know as well, and you drive behind the
lead follower.
It's only lead follower.
Okay.
Because there were too many Russians that did something. It's only lead follower. I don't know if it's all Russians, but there are too many accidents happened, and now they do it. But that is a very cost-effective way, and it's a full fully arranged, and there's an instructor from BMW North America taking you by the hand, and we know that because it's normally that's not our clientele directly because they go to the North South on a BMW tour, but they come to Spa with us then afterwards. So they always do the combination Nürburgring and Spa. We need to talk about that as well. Apart from that, there's a lot of clubs like the Classic Car Club New York, which is always visiting every year with a group. We have there's so many clubs at a racetrack, and these clubs, like for example, Lime Rock Park has a road racing club, Lime Rock Road Racing Club, and they also always come with a group of 10 people driving with us. We're going to do Hooked on Driving.
You are going to do Hooked on Driving.
The main guy is now convinced that this is a good product to do. Road and Track America. We already had somebody from Road and Track writing an amazing, one of the best articles we ever had.
Road and Track from the magazine versus Road America.
Road and Track from the magazine.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So there's various ways to do this in a group, and that's also one of the reasons why I'm here in Seattle is because Ross Bentley of Speed Secrets fame is from here, and we do that already for I think 5, 6, 7 years, and it's a very high-end program where, and you listen to this. This is really interesting how he does this because in fact he is. In his community, he sources the clients and he screens them. So you have to have a certain level before you're able to join in the group. And it's a whole preparation of half a year of doing sim work and learning the track. So when you're there, you know the real thing is completely different from the artificial thing. But when the shock is behind you, and you get settled
you have a
in,
basic concept of the track layout.
yes, and even a bit more.
Because it's so difficult to learn that track. I mean, there's
it is
on one visit.
it is a handful. Yeah, it is for a long time. And but I always say when a track would be 4 corners of 90 degrees, it would be simple, but boring right away. Yeah. And this track will never be boring, and you learn something new every time you come here. So with Ross, he selects all these people, brings them up to a certain level. There's seminars, podcast stuff, and there's a whole lot of stuff going on beforehand, so that when people come, they're at least prepared, and you cannot filter that out that there's sometimes somebody there who is not at that level and will never be, but still we try to make
that's an interesting concept that we should talk about it, guys, when we put a trip together now again for people, maybe spending 6 months. All these new sim companies are here, they're all local.
So you have to find these people with those budgets, but here in the Northwest, there's so much money.
Yeah.
You have to get to the right people. And
there are people. The money is here, and you have guys that when they are doing this driving, they're getting their rocks off on their own Porsches and going to the tracks here. But to try and explain to them what this is, unless they've gone there, it's just. And once they go, they see the light. But to bring them more prepared is important, because I realized this when I went to Spa with you the first time. Spa is a track where in one day I can kind of remember the track. I can call out the corners. I'm not an expert at the track, but I know, okay, this is Pouin coming up, this is Blanchimont coming up.
You see it coming.
Here's the double apex, and you know.
Yeah.
But at the Nürburgring, I always equated to driving really fast, drunk at night, on some back roads in the woods somewhere, and you don't know if there's going to be a deer or what the next corner is going to be. Tour bus, The Nürburgring is just so daunting and intimidating. It's almost better to go to Spa. I love Spa. It's got all that runoff. It's such a beautiful track.
Yeah, I don't think it's better to go to Spa. They're so, you cannot compare those two. They're so different. But you have to do different things at each track. At Spa, you can go way more for going to the limits and maybe overstepping the limits a bit, because you can get away with that. And as you said, it's so easy to learn, and you see most of the corners are not blind, so you see where you're going. And
Right.
Of course, the Eau Rouge Rayon is blind; you cannot see it, but most of them is visible. So it's much more a racing track where you go to limits and you time and try different techniques, and there's so much variation in corners that you can learn so much. You can learn a lot about braking because of the runoff at the end of the main straight. You can learn a lot about sacrificing sections of a corner, which is when there's 3 corners very close together and they form in fact one section, and sacrificing here or there to have working on a higher exit speed or working on spending the least time in the corners itself. And time that and see what works for you and what doesn't. There's a lot of high speed stuff, there's a lot of medium speed corners, so it's a perfect track for improving your driving and and also for adapting to a different driving style and being able to to choose that and to adapt to that on any other track in the world. And see what that brings you in lap time. Nürburgring, it's completely different. You have to go, try to go to limits or to, and then a lower sort of limit compared to Spa, and go step by step. First learning the track, and then you're gonna go in a little bit later or go in a little bit earlier, and try to keep, pull 100 revs more on the apex, and
it's also
way slower.
It's especially treacherous at the ring because what I was going to say about Spa versus the Nürburgring is just that you have the added element of the microclimate at the Nürburgring. So I remember one of the trips I went out there, it was late May, and it was sunny like it is here in Seattle. It was kind of a beautiful day on the front end. It was cold, but as soon as we went down to the back end of the track, it was snowing on the back part of the track. It was ridiculous. Whereas Spa, it's either sunny or it was raining, right? It's always fucking raining.
And you see way further ahead. Right. So at the Nürburgring, it comes as a big surprise.
But in October at the Nürburgring, September, October can be pretty sketchy. So talking about times, you're probably better off in the summer. It's a bit of a pucker to drive at the Nürburgring in late October. The backside going down the Foxhole can be slippery. It's scary. That track. People should not go there and get into a car that is more than what they can handle. Yeah. And they should not be too quick to want to fly on their own and not have an instructor. Take the instruction, buy the instruction from you guys, and take the instruction because you're going to need it when you're coming to the corner.
But I think still the track has the wrong reputation, which is also, I think, and back in the beginning when we only had drivers who knew the track because of their racing background or track day background, even if that was not an industry back then. We had a higher level of drivers who could cope with oversteer, understeer everywhere, with having no ABS, no traction control, no stability system, nothing. Now that is the unthinkable because we have so many people now who never been on a racetrack before, and then yes, it's more difficult, but the cars of today are so good that you almost must be an idiot to crash it in.
But
because of that there's, I think there's not even, back then there was not even 5% of the volume that is now. So we have so many people there, and then yes, of course you see crashes on tourist session, because you also see crashes in the races. So people, they cock up, but most of the time when in our school as well, we tell you exactly what not to do and what to do. And if you don't do what we tell you not to do, then you will not crash. Nobody needs to crash at the Nürburgring. So it has a sort of a false reputation. And yes, all these crashes are highlighted, but most of the time these people are, I'm sorry, they want to do stuff like trying to follow another car, trying to keep in front of cars that are, you know, pulling up behind them because they think they're winning a race or something.
Right.
You know, still pushing when you're insecure. Hey, is that this corner or this corner? So going too fast too soon. And when you don't do all that stuff and you use common sense and you have a car with all the systems on, then I promise you nothing needs to happen. Nothing needs to go wrong. And then when you have an instructor in the car, then for sure nothing.
But Ron, all those systems, I consider you more of a purist. Don't you feel like those things keep you from becoming a better driver? I mean, if you have all of these systems that make these cars so good, and it makes an average driver now perform like they're great, it instills an inflated sense of confidence in the driver. They don't really learn. It's like people only drive in the sunny weather. You know, go drive in the rain.
Yeah, if you don't want to learn, I agree with you. If you don't want to learn, or if you just,
one time.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you still keep on driving into the ESP or into the ABS and you think it's fun and think that is how it should be done because you reach the limits of the car, then, you know, as long as you're having fun with that, fine. But I disagree on you in this way because, like say, an example of a Megane RS4, RS3 in the rain at Spa with all the systems on, and you have these steps, you put it to Sport and Sport Plus and Sport Plus Plus Plus, and what it does, it interacts in a slower way and it gives you more liberties to for the car stepping out for understeer and then the trick is to because when these systems are quite advanced, but still it can be clumsy. If you go up the hill at Eau Rouge Vaillant and you get to that little bit of oversteer, but you keep it within the range the system gives you, then you have best of both worlds, because and you have the net below you, so you know that the car will catch it when you run out of talent or go too far. And you still have the feeling that you drive the car and you stay within the limits the system setting gives you, and that is perfect for learning.
Let me ask the question a different way. Not because I want to push you in one direction or another, but I want to understand this. If you take a car like what I built for myself, my monster engine, all analog. I'm the most digital thing in the car. Okay, There's no traction control. It has an LSD, but there's no traction control, there's no stability protection, there's no ABS brakes. There's nothing electronic in that car in terms of car control. I feel like if you put me in that car for a month, unlimited budget on tires, brakes, and gas and track time, or you put me in a car that's very electronically advanced and has a lot of these nannies that are always on, don't you feel like that same driver, me or somebody different, given the same opportunity for a month in this car, same track, same conditions, wouldn't you develop a much better driver from the analog driver, because he has to learn how to control the car, how to be ultra smooth on the gas pedal, ultra smooth in transition to the brake, very smooth minor inputs on the steering. You have to really read the car, and you have to really know what you're doing. Doesn't it develop a much better driver to have a more analog car long term? Or are you saying that the electronic car gives more opportunity for stepped learning?
Isn't it a bit, I don't know, isn't it a bit depending on what type of driver you are? Because both systems definitely work, and you're working towards the same goal.
Right.
Only with, it's compared a bit like Nürburgring and Spa. At Spa, regardless of the car, you approach limits from stepping up and going. And at Spa, you can go over the limit, use the runoff, which is a concrete parking lot, and know that okay, this is now I took it too far, so I have to dial it back.
Yeah.
In your situation where you have a purely analog car, you need a lot of tires if you lock up the brakes every time on rough times. So you don't approach the limits from going
From the top.
yeah. So it's
Understand.
much more sensitive thing, but in the end you end up at the same thing.
Right.
And isn't it true that you will learn a lot from both, because you learn a lot from having to stay within these limits and sort it out yourself when you go too far, and you're way more, I think, conservative with
It's
that.
just more old school, I guess, in that
Old
way.
school, yeah. And in a car with all these nannies, you can go fast more freely,
Right.
and so you probably are faster at an earlier stage of the learning curve.
That was my
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
You could be faster at an earlier stage in a digitally controlled car, but it would give me a false sense of accomplishment.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Technology.
So the nicest car I ever drove at either one of those tracks with you, I was very fortunate. We were at Spa, and one of your private customers had his Ferrari F50 there, and it was the silver one.
Mm.
And we jumped in the car, we went flying around Spa, and I'll never forget the sound of that motor, and I'll never ever forget that experience of being able to. Most people are never even close to one of those cars.
Mm.
Be able to sit in there with Ron, the Flying Dutchman, take you around the track in F50 at Spa on a clear sunny day like this. Unbelievable.
Mm.
Then I remember the contrast was you and me in one of the 75s. We're at the Nürburgring, and I think we were just going to lunch. We were going down to Adenau. We were going to get off down there and go to Pinocchio's or whatever we do.
Uh-huh.
But at the very early part of the track, there was some guy in a Porsche, and he cut you off, and you're like, now look at this now. Of course, there goes Ron. He has to chase him in the corners. And then on the straight, the guy puts his wallet on the gas pedal, and he goes. And then at the next corner, here we are again, on top of him. And then at some point, I think we ended up sideways and backwards, but on the grass next to the barrier. But I was impressed at how fast you were able to react looking in the mirrors and just maneuver the car backwards along the guardrail, to a stop. Anybody else would have been in that guardrail. You just have enough time there. It just impresses me. It just impresses me. But so now you've got these newer cars, and there's a lot of dollars at stake. You built this new amazing facility at Spa. What's that, 10,000 square meters or something? How big is that building?
Mm.
It's a huge facility. You've got all these cars there. You've got all this money on the line. What's next? Keep growing the business, or are you at a level now where you say, I'm going to keep it here, or where are you taking the business to?
Well, I think first of all we have COVID, and COVID meant for us in beginning of 2020 that car rental was dead. There was nobody able to travel. We rent cars to people who don't have a car there. So the Germans and the French and they all have their own car. So we rent out cars to people from who need to fly in. So and that stopped. So we didn't need that. So we still have way too many cars. Even now. I'm happy where we are, because we're in Nürburgring we're more relying on renting out cars for tourist sessions. In Spa we are doing track days. So we're one of the, I think, the partner for Spa-Francorchamps for track days. So we have track days every month, a couple at Spa, and the track day business is very good for us, because in Belgium you couldn't go to a restaurant, you couldn't go to a hotel, but you could go to the racetrack and go around in circles. So that was very good in 2020, and also last year was perfect. But we're still a little bit recovering from that. We did Iberia as a third leg, having a base in Portimao, which is amazing track. Portimao is an amazing track.
American drivers know it more from GP, from MotoGP.
Really, but Formula One was there last. But it's an amazing place.
But Ascari is less known. But you tag those two together.
Yeah. So that we do the events there. But it did not work out because there's not enough track time available over there. And so when you ask me what is next, and next is I would like to have a third leg. And we got these offers from Sochi and from the band in South Australia, I know there's a new one coming up where they want to have a partner in this. There's so many tracks.
But that would be
all
far
over
to
the
manage
world.
for you. I mean, it's like
Yeah, so
to
that
manage
is
that in
different.
Australia.
Also in Bahrain, they wanted us to do a school there. It is all too much, but now we're looking at Italy. And why Italy? Italy because they have this motor valley with Pagani and Ducati and all those brands all together. The food is sensational, and they have great tracks. And Monza would be the first choice for marketing wise, because everybody knows Monza, and it's one of those three tracks together with Spa and Nürburgring of its heyday, and you can still go to the old banking in Monza. It's spectacular. So that would be marketing wise the wisest decision, but the track is now a bit blunt,
old.
a bit, yeah, it's not old, but the outline of the track is a bit stop and go. So it's not super interesting. So we're looking at Imola and combining Imola with Mugello. It's like the sun and the earth that only is existing once in the universe. We have Nürburgring and Spa,
right,
but
close together.
Imola and
if you're
Mugello
in Italy,
is the same kind of thing.
they're close
It's
enough,
only
an hour away.
1 hour away with beautiful roads, and you're close to Florence and Tuscany and also, and there's nobody else is doing this thing.
How's your
at the
Italian?
Nürburgring,
How's your Italian?
non-existent.
You lived in Germany and you're fluent in German. Of course, you're Dutch, and people don't even realize that because, well, I don't know. Manuela, is he German decent? Or is it too much accent? He's German, is it pretty good? Manuela, when she came to the States the first time with us, you had to translate everything for her.
Really, yeah.
And her English is better than
Yeah.
yours now.
Yeah, but
She deals with all the American tourists. But yeah, I mean, you're fluent in German and Dutch and English.
but so I'm
Italian's
quite
awesome.
excited about the Italian thing.
Yes. Well, hopefully we can join you there. They're just gonna have to do something about this COVID thing's gotta go bye-bye.
Yeah.
It'll be nice to see you guys there.
Mm.
Well, Ron, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. So basically, I hope it's not another 2 years before I see you again. I mean, we were well on our way back. We were there October 2019, and we came back, and we were supposed to connect with you guys in Portimao and Ascari in March or April.
Yeah.
Right after that was 2020. It was done. When are you doing Ascari and Portimao? I want to do that trip. I know it costs a little bit more, but I want to do that trip. If you guys want to have an experience that it's a once in a lifetime thing, take your bucket list, rip it up, start a new one. Put driving with Ron Simons and his team at Spa-Francorchamps and at the Nürburgring, or a nice 2-week trip. Bring your significant other, go down to Ascari in the south of Spain, go to Portimao in Portugal, do that whole 2-week thing. Put it at the top of your bucket list, cancel everything else, and make that a goal to take this trip. And these people we'll set it up right for you. Your accommodations, your transfers, you can be as independent as you want, you book your own air ticket in and out, you rent your car and you drive, you're on your own, or, between us, we'll work out the logistics and make it as painless as possible. But put this on the list and do this drive, But I really appreciate you guys coming out today and hanging out with us. I mean, Group 2 has also grown a lot from when you first met us 18 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I was excited to share with you all the growth and all the things we've done here. So it was good to see you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Cool. Nice to be here.
Thanks, buddy.